When flames consume everything you've ever loved, hope can feel like it's gone forever. But sometimes, heroes have 4 paws, golden fur, and a red cape. This is the story of how a brave golden retriever, known as SuperRetriever, emerged from the ashes to lead one devastated family to an unbelievable miracle. Watch until the very end, because this story will remind you that even in the darkest moments, light finds its way back. And if you believe heroes come in all shapes and sizes, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. The night was supposed to be ordinary, quiet, with the gentle sound of wind brushing against the trees. Inside the modest countryside home, the Martin family had already settled in. John Martin was dozing off in his armchair. His wife, Anna, was folding laundry in the living room, and their 2 children, Lily and Ben, were upstairs reading before bed. In the corner, curled up but alert, lay SuperRetriever, the family's loyal golden retriever wearing his trademark red Superman cape, a playful gift from Ben that had become his everyday attire. It began as a faint smell, smoke, sharp and unnatural. SuperRetriever's ears twitched, his head snapping up. The smell intensified quickly, and within seconds, an orange flicker appeared through the kitchen doorway. The fire spread with terrifying speed, greedily devouring curtains, furniture, and walls. John jumped up, yelling for Anna to grab the kids. Lily and Ben rushed down the stairs, coughing as smoke thickened in the air. SuperRetriever barked furiously, darting between each family member, herding them toward the front door. The fire roared louder, glass shattered, and the once warm home became a furnace. John grabbed the emergency bag by the door, but it was too late to save anything else. The flames were unstoppable. The family stumbled outside into the cold night air, illuminated by the glow of their burning home. The sound of cracking wood and collapsing beams echoed in the distance. From the safety of the yard, they could only watch as their memories, birthday, parties, Christmas mornings, the children's drawings still pinned to the fridge, turned to ash. Tears streamed down Anna's face. Ben clung to SuperRetriever, burying his face in the golden fur that smelled faintly of smoke. The dog's chest rose and fell rapidly, but his eyes remained sharp and alert, scanning the surroundings as if searching for something. By the time the fire trucks arrived, there was little left to save. The Martins stood in silence, numb, as firefighters battled the inferno. The night felt endless. SuperRetriever stayed close, occasionally nudging their hands or leaning into their legs, as if to remind them he was there. His cape was singed at the edges, a silent badge of the chaos they had just survived. When the flames finally died, only a blackened skeleton of the house remained. The Martins had escaped with their lives, and nothing else. Yet, as the smoke curled into the starless sky, SuperRetriever's gaze shifted toward the far corner of the yard, his ears perking up. He gave a quiet whine, a sign that the story wasn't over. Not yet. The first rays of morning light crept over the horizon, bathing the charred remains of the Martins' home in a cold, almost merciless clarity. What the darkness had hidden, daylight now revealed in all its brutality. The house was nothing, more than a shell. Walls collapsed, beams twisted like bones, the ground littered with ashes that still smoked faintly in the chilly air. John stood at the edge of the wreckage, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his soot-stained jeans. His eyes were fixed on the ruins, but his mind was adrift, replaying the fire in slow motion. Anna sat on the tailgate of a neighbor's pickup, her hair tangled, her hands trembling as she cradled a mug of coffee someone had offered, more for comfort than warmth. Lily and Ben huddled under a blanket, their faces pale, staring at what had once been their bedrooms. And there was SuperRetriever, his golden fur dulled with soot, the edges of his red Superman cape frayed and blackened. He sat between the children, ears alert, eyes scanning the ruins as if waiting for a signal. Every so often, his tail gave a slow, deliberate wag, not the playful kind, but one that seemed almost purposeful. The Martins had always believed that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. But standing there in the daylight, surrounded by the ashes of decades of memories, that belief felt fragile. The fire hadn't just taken possessions, it had stolen pieces of their identity, family photographs, heirlooms passed down for generations, the little keepsakes that marked milestones in their lives. A neighbor approached quietly, placing a sympathetic hand on John's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, John. If you need a place to stay," John nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks, we'll figure something out." But inside, he didn't know how. Insurance could replace a house, but it couldn't rebuild a lifetime of memories. As the sun climbed higher, the Martins began walking through the wreckage, careful not to step on nails or unstable boards. Anna bent down to pick up a half-burned photo frame, its glass cracked, the picture inside warped beyond recognition. She stared at it for a long moment before setting it down again, her lip trembling. SuperRetriever followed them closely, his nose twitching, occasionally stopping to sniff the ground. At first, they thought it was just his way of exploring, but there was something different in his movements, more deliberate, more insistent. He would pause, sniff, then glance back, at them as if trying to say something without words. It was Ben who noticed it first. "Dad, he keeps looking over there." He pointed to the far corner of the yard near a cluster of scorched bushes. John frowned. Probably just smells an animal. But as SuperRetriever gave a sharp bark and began trotting in that direction, tail raised high, none of them could have guessed that he was about to lead them to something that would change everything. SuperRetriever stopped just shy of the burned bushes, his body tense, ears perked forward. His tail was held high, swaying slowly like a flag marking an invisible target. He lowered his head and began sniffing the ground with focused determination, tracing a tight circle before pawing at the earth. The Martins approached cautiously. The soil here was dark but not charred, protected somehow, as if the flames had skipped over this one small patch. It stood out in stark contrast to the devastation around it. Anna knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly. SuperRetriever paused his digging to glance at her, his eyes sharp, almost human in their intensity, before resuming his work with renewed urgency. Dirt flew in quick bursts from beneath his strong paws. John crouched down, watching closely. He's not just playing. He's looking for something. Lily and Ben exchanged curious glances, inching closer. Ben reached out to stroke SuperRetriever's back, his small fingers brushing over the frayed edge of the red Superman cape. "You think he smells food?" Lily asked. "No," Ben whispered, shaking his head. "It's something else." The dog's behavior was deliberate, almost methodical. He wasn't randomly scratching at the earth. He was following an unseen map only he could sense. Every few seconds, he'd stop, sniff again, and adjust his digging spot by just a few inches, like a treasure hunter fine-tuning his search. John leaned back on his heels, suddenly remembering something his father once told him. "Dogs don't waste energy. If they're fixated on a spot, there's a reason." The morning breeze carried the faint scent of damp soil mixed with smoke, but there was no trace of food or any obvious object buried there. Still, SuperRetriever dug with the kind of persistence that made it clear. He knew exactly what he was doing. Anna hesitated, looking at John. "Should we help him?" John considered it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, let's see what's got him so worked up." SuperRetriever stepped back just enough to give John space, but his eyes never left the hole. His tail thumped the ground twice, short, eager beats, before he sat down, watching intently, as if certain the Martins were about to uncover something important. None of them realized it yet, but in that moment, the first thread of hope since the fire had just been pulled. John knelt by the disturbed patch of earth, brushing away some of the loose dirt with his hands. The soil felt oddly cool beneath his fingers, untouched by the heat that had scorched everything else. But before he could dig deeper, SuperRetriever gave a short, sharp bark and stepped away from the spot, glancing back at the family as if to say, "Not here. Not yet." Then, without warning, he trotted toward the skeletal remains of the house. The Martins exchanged puzzled looks before following him cautiously, weaving between collapsed beams and blackened debris. Ash crunched under their boots, and every step stirred up faint wisps of gray dust that danced in the sunlight. SuperRetriever moved with uncanny precision, never lingering, never hesitating. He paused at what used to be the living room, now nothing more than a charred floor, covered in fragments of shattered glass and warped metal. His nose lowered, sniffing, before he turned sharply and slipped through a narrow gap between two fallen beams. "Careful," John warned, helping Anna and the kids navigate around the unstable ruins. The dog stopped again, pawing at a scorched floorboard, then lifting his head to glance at them before continuing toward the backyard. It was as if he was piecing together a path, one only he could sense, connecting the untouched soil they'd just seen to somewhere deeper in the property. Lily clutched Ben's hand. "Do you think he's following a smell from before? The fire?" John didn't answer. His focus was locked on the way SuperRetriever's body moved, every muscle tense, every step deliberate. This wasn't random exploration. This was a mission. When they reached the back fence, the dog stopped abruptly at a patch of ground half hidden by collapsed branches from a tree that had partially burned. The branches were still warm to the touch, embers glowing faintly at their ends. SuperRetriever barked again, 3 quick bursts, then began digging furiously. Ben's voice trembled with excitement. "Dad, it's the same way he was digging before." John's pulse quickened. The air here smelled different, less of ash, more of damp earth, as if the fire had struggled to reach this spot. He crouched beside SuperRetriever, pulling away the burned branches to clear the space. Anna and the kids leaned in, curiosity replacing some of the grief that had weighed them down since last night. And then John noticed something. The edge of what looked like metal just barely peeking through the dirt. SuperRetriever froze for a moment, his eyes locking with John's as if to say, "This is it." They didn't know it yet, but they were standing on the threshold of the miracle. John's breath caught as he brushed more soil away from the small glint of metal. It was no larger than a coin at first, but the shape beneath hinted at something more. Edges too straight to be stone, too deliberate to be random debris. SuperRetriever stood perfectly still now, his chest rising and falling in quick, eager bursts. His tail swayed slowly, like a metronome counting down the seconds until the truth was revealed. He let out a low whine, leaning closer, but not touching the spot, as if he understood that the next move belonged to the Martins. Anna knelt beside John, her hands trembling as she reached out to scrape away more dirt. The soil was damp, clumping, under her fingernails, but it shifted easily, as if it had been loosened long before the fire. "What do you think it is?" Lily asked, her voice a mix of hope and disbelief. John didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept digging, revealing more of the metal surface, now clearly a corner, curved slightly, with faint grooves running along its side. His heart began to race. "It's a box," he finally said, his voice low. "A metal box." Anna's eyes widened. Ben took a step closer, his hands gripping the edges of his blanket. "Like a treasure chest?" SuperRetriever barked once, a sharp, almost triumphant sound that startled everyone. He then circled the spot twice, sat down facing the family, and tilted his head as if to say, "You found it. Now open it." John glanced at Anna, then at the kids. For a brief, fragile moment, the crushing weight of their loss lifted, replaced by something they hadn't felt since before the fire: anticipation. The metal was old, the surface pitted, and dulled with time, but intact. No signs of melting, no warping from heat. It must have been buried deep enough to escape the fire's reach. John could almost feel the significance radiating from it, as if whatever lay inside had been waiting, patiently, silently for this moment. Anna swallowed hard. "Do you think it could be—" She didn't finish the sentence, but John knew what she meant. Family heirlooms. Jewelry passed down through generations. Photographs. The irreplaceable things they thought were gone forever. John sat back, on his heels, his eyes locking with SuperRetrievers. "If this is what I think it is, you just gave us a piece of our life back, buddy." The dog's ears twitched and his tail thumped the ground twice in steady, confident beats. They hadn't even opened the box yet, but Hope was already breathing again. John rolled up the sleeves of his soot-streaked shirt, his hands already raw from clearing debris earlier that morning. The corner of the metal box glinted faintly in the pale sunlight, half buried under a blanket of damp earth and ash. Whatever was inside had been sealed away from the fire, waiting like a secret too stubborn to burn. SuperRetriever sat close, his body angled toward the find, as if guarding it from the world. Every time John's shovel cut into the soil, the dog's eyes followed the motion with unwavering focus. The red Superman cape, though frayed and singed, fluttered faintly in the breeze. Its bright color a small, stubborn defiance against the blackened ruins surrounding them. Anna knelt beside her husband, using her hands to scoop away smaller clumps of dirt that the shovel missed. Lily and Ben crouched nearby, working with plastic garden trowels someone from the neighborhood had given them. Even their small hands joined in the effort, the dirt cool and heavy against their fingers. Minutes passed in silence, the only sounds the scrape of metal on earth and the distant caw of a crow overhead. The deeper they dug, the larger the box revealed itself to be, about the size of a large suitcase, its surface marked with rust in places but otherwise perfectly intact. Anna leaned closer, her breath catching. "It's heavier than I expected." "Like there's a lot in there." Ben's eyes shone. "Maybe it's gold, or all our old photos." Lily nudged him. "Or both." SuperRetriever shifted, his nose brushing the edge of the box before he sat back again, tail wagging once, firmly, like a silent nod of encouragement. Finally, with a combined effort, John and Anna lifted the box free from the earth. It emerged, with a muffled thunk, bits of dirt and root clinging to its surface. They set it gently on the ground, and for a moment, no one spoke. The box was secured with an old brass latch, tarnished but functional. John ran his thumb over it, his mind racing through memories. How long had it been there? He couldn't recall ever burying anything like this, but it felt familiar somehow. Anna glanced at him, her eyes shimmering. "Should we open it?" John hesitated, his gaze flicking to SuperRetriever. The dog tilted his head, ears perked, as if urging him on. The Martins had lost everything the night before, but now, crouched in the backyard with this mysterious box between them, they felt the first spark of possibility. John exhaled slowly. "Let's see what our hero brought back to us." John's fingers hovered over the brass latch, his pulse quickening with every breath. Around him, the world seemed to go quiet. No wind, no distant voices, just the sound of his heartbeat in his ears. SuperRetriever inched closer, his nose brushing the side of the box, eyes locked on John as if saying, "Now." With a click, the latch gave way. The creak of the hinges was slow, almost ceremonial, as the lid lifted to reveal the contents inside. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Anna's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Inside, nestled in faded cloth, lay jewelry passed down for generations. A gold bracelet from Anna's grandmother, a delicate locket containing a black and white wedding photo, rings that had been worn by family members long gone. Beside them were stacks of photographs, some in frames, others loose but perfectly preserved. Birthday parties, summer vacations, the day Lily was born, Ben's first steps, moments frozen in time, untouched by the fire. Anna reached in with trembling fingers, lifting a photograph of her parents standing in front of their old farmhouse, smiling in the sunlight. She hadn't seen that photo in years. John's throat tightened as he picked up a small, carved wooden box from inside. The chest. He opened it to find a collection of handwritten letters, the ones he and Anna had exchanged when they first met. The paper was yellowed but intact, the ink still bold, carrying the voices of their younger selves. Lily pulled out a tiny porcelain figurine, chipped at the base, and gasped. "This was in my room, the one Grandma gave me." Ben dug carefully, until he found a stack of baseball cards wrapped in plastic. "Dad, these are the ones you told me you collected as a kid." The Martins laughed through their tears, each item pulling them deeper into a flood of memories they thought had been erased forever. John looked at Anna, his voice breaking. If it weren't for him. He turned to SuperRetriever, who now sat proudly, chest out, tail swishing slowly in the dirt. The sunlight caught the edge of his cape, making it glow. Anna knelt in front of the dog, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You didn't just save our lives, boy. You saved our history." SuperRetriever leaned into her embrace, eyes half closed, as if content now that his mission was complete. The box hadn't just given them treasures. It had given them a piece of themselves back, and in the middle of the ashes, that was a miracle. The Martins gathered around the open box as if it were a portal to another life, the one they'd lived before the fire. Sunlight streamed over their shoulders, catching the edges of the objects inside and making them gleam against the dull gray of ash surrounding them. SuperRetriever lay just a few feet away, watching quietly. His red Superman cape spread over the dirt like a banner marking victory. Anna reached in first, lifting a velvet pouch. When she loosened the drawstring, a cascade of gold and silver jewelry spilled into her palm. There was her grandmother's wedding ring, engraved with initials that had faded but were still just visible, the sapphire brooch her mother had worn on special occasions, and a delicate chain with a tiny heart charm she'd been given on her 16th birthday. She held them as though they might dissolve in her hands, tears streaking her soot-marked cheeks. "I thought these were gone forever." John's turn came next. He removed a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, the fabric stiff with age. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, perfectly preserved. He shuffled through them slowly. Their wedding, day, Lily's first school recital, Ben holding a fishing pole bigger than himself. The photos still carried the warm colors of the moments they'd captured, untouched by flame or smoke. Lily spotted a small wooden jewelry box tucked against the side. She lifted the lid to reveal a collection of trinkets. Friendship bracelets from elementary school, a tiny seashell from a family trip, and a folded note in her own handwriting, something she'd written when she was 8, addressed to Future. "Lily!" She read it aloud, her voice trembling, and then hugged it to her chest. Ben dug carefully until he found the baseball card collection his father had once told him about. The cards were kept in pristine plastic sleeves, the edges sharp, the colors vivid. "Dad, you could have sold these, but you kept them." John smiled faintly. "Some things are worth more than money." Anna lifted one last item, a leather-bound notebook. She flipped it open and found John's old letters to her, written when they were dating. She read a few lines softly, the corners of her mouth curling upward. In the middle of ruin, these words felt like embers, small, glowing, still capable of warmth. One by one, they set the items carefully on a blanket spread out on the ground, almost like laying out pieces of a puzzle. Every piece was a fragment of their story, each one reminding them that while the fire had taken their house, it hadn't taken them. SuperRetriever finally stood, walking over to sit between them. He pressed his head gently into Anna's side, as if to say, "Now you remember. You still have everything that matters." For a long moment, no one spoke. The blanket on the ground was now covered with the artifacts of a lifetime, jewelry, photographs, letters, trinkets, each one a survivor in its own right. Against the backdrop of the blackened ruins, they shone like small lanterns in the dark. Anna sat cross-legged beside them, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the locket. "It's like pieces of our heart came back to us." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and she quickly wiped her eyes. John put an arm around her shoulders, his own eyes glistening. "We thought we lost everything, but we didn't. Not everything." Lily held the tiny porcelain figurine to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Ben sat with the baseball cards spread out in his lap, looking at them as though they held the key to a secret. And then all four of them turned to SuperRetriever. The golden retriever sat in the middle of their circle, his posture regal yet relaxed, his head tilted slightly. His red Superman cape fluttered gently in the breeze, singed at the edges but still vibrant. The morning sun lit up his fur, giving him a halo-like glow. Anna leaned forward, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You saved us twice, you know. First our lives, and then our memories." Lily and Ben quickly joined in, their small hands tangling in his fur, their faces pressed against him. SuperRetriever accepted their affection with quiet dignity, his tail thumping softly against the ground. John crouched down to meet the dog's gaze. "I don't know how you knew, buddy, but you knew, and we'll never forget it." In that moment, the family wasn't thinking about the ashes, the loss, or the long road ahead. They were thinking about the fact that miracles could come in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes they arrived on four paws wearing a cape. SuperRetriever gave one last happy bark, breaking the emotional silence, and for the first time since the fire, laughter rose from the Martins' yard. It was soft at first, then full and real, the kind of laughter that carries the promise of healing. In the days that followed, the Martins began rebuilding, not just their home, but their sense of hope. The road ahead would be long, but they now carried something the fire could never destroy, the memories and love that defined them. And at the center of it all was SuperRetriever, the hero who had led them from despair to a miracle. Life has zeb, a way of taking things from us, sometimes suddenly without warning. In those moments, it's easy to believe that everything is lost. But this story is proof that even in the ashes of our darkest days, there can be something waiting to be found, if we keep our hearts open and trust the unexpected. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with flashing lights or grand announcements. Sometimes they walk beside us every day, quiet, loyal, and ready to show us the way back to what matters most. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where you thought all was lost, only for life to surprise you with something you didn't expect? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and your words might inspire someone else who needs hope today. If this story touched you, give it a like. It helps more people find this message. And if you believe in miracles, big or small, subscribe to this channel, because next time I'll share another unbelievable true story that will leave you speechless, and maybe even in tears, because somewhere out there, another miracle is already on its way.